Good morning. I'm Carol Black. I'm a member of the Board of Trustees here at the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of the Swannanoa Valley. I would like to ask you, while I'm thinking of it, to please make sure your phones are silenced. We are a welcoming and diverse community, and whoever you are and whatever your reasons for being here this morning, you are very welcome. And we hope you leave here with a full heart and an inspired mind. And maybe with a full stomach today, because we have our monthly potluck. And there's always plenty. There's always more than enough. So please stay for food and fellowship after the service. We hold no creed or dogma, but we do try to live according to UU principles, which are printed on the back of the order of service. And to fulfill the mission of this congregation, which is on the front of the order of service. We realize that the land we occupy was not always ours, and we recognize the First Nations that were here before us with a land acknowledgement. You may have read and heard that our Social Action Committee is re-examining the statement, and that updated, more conscious statement as well as actions are in the works. For today, however, please read with me from the back of the order of service, our land acknowledgement. UU see this being acknowledges with respect that the land we are on today is the ancestral home of the Cherokee and other indigenous people. The Cherokee, through stewardship, understanding, and conservation, survive and thrive in this land. We acknowledge their enduring connection to their homeland. It is our custom to welcome, looks like we have a lot of visitors today. We have Eve's fan club. To invite visitors, if you're comfortable, to stand and tell us your name and where you're from. And let's start on this side.
I'm Jan, I'm from Charlotte.
I'm Sheila, I'm from Charlotte.
Judy from Charlotte.
Welcome. Alex from Black Mountain.
We have one more.
I'm Ethan, I think I'm from Albany. Beth. I'm a member of the EU in Asheville.
Welcome. If you're interested in finding out more about our community or receiving our weekly e-newsletter, please see anyone with an orange tag. Show us your orange tags. And also Michelle, our membership committee chairperson, will be at the welcoming table in the foyer. If you need any information at all, she can provide it at the greeting table where you got your name tags. I have a couple of announcements. We sent $1,000 to each of 2 local funds in Texas for flood relief that were vetted by our treasurer, Peter, and it was unanimously approved by the board. While I have the mic, I would like to acknowledge Mary Soyanova for providing gorgeous flowers almost every week. And now, oh, I'm sorry, there's another announcement. Short-term memory is gone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
September 6th, mark it on your calendar. Anybody have any extra stuff in their garage, in their closet, extra things that you'd like to re-gift? We're having our annual rummage sale in concert with the Social Action Committee. So it's going to be a really fun event where there's going to be different things happening around recycling, being able to bring, hi Roger, being able to bring your hard to recycle items, and there will be some educational things around recycling, etc. Did I forget anything, Risa?
The date.
Huh?
The date.
No, we're good. Date is September 6th.
Recycling is on the day before.
Recycling is on the day before, so September 5th is the recycling. We will be collecting all of the wonderful items that you'll be contributing the week prior to, so the Sunday, in between Sunday service and the Saturday of the rummage sale, yes? Okay, great. And so if you have any items or whatever, contact myself or Marty Saltzman. And if you like people and retail and schmoozing, also see us, because we're going to need a lot of helping hands to help us organize and have a successful sale. Thanks very much.
So now, in perfect love and profound gratitude, let us begin our service.
Good to be back with you all, this warm and friendly congregation. Thanks for having me again. Our chalice lighting comes from Jack Kornfield's Buddha's Little Instruction Book. If you wish to know the divine, feel the wind on your face and the warm sun on your hand. It is kind of funny to think that one of the great fathers of capitalism was once a little boy, but it's true, of course. Adam Smith was born in 1723 in a small fishing village in Scotland. And I imagine him exploring the coastline as a kid, watching the big ships that would carry coal and salt and linen from his part of the world to ports and other places far away, already fascinated by the inner workings of commerce. Adam Smith's childhood must have been a lonely one. His dad died before he was born, and he was sick all the time and spent a lot of time by himself just reading books for hours. But whatever happened to him in his childhood or young adulthood, Adam Smith came to see the world and the people in it as motivated first and foremost by competition and an inherent need to crowd out the small in favor of the big. He wrote a book exploring why some nations have a lot of wealth and others don't. And in that book, he tells the story of humans as primarily self-interested beings. And he argued that if we just allowed that self-interest to play out unchecked, it would develop into a natural competition that would weed out the weak and result in wealthier and more powerful societies. His book, The Wealth of Nations, was published in 1776 and became a bestseller. Within 6 months, the first edition sold out, an instant classic across the white Western world. And it became the foundation of modern economics and paved the way for capitalism. A few decades later, a British scientist named Charles Darwin published a book that would become the foundation of evolutionary biology. And Darwin's work also got a lot of attention, both good and bad press. And we know that book today as On the Origin of the Species. And Darwin's full title was a little more cumbersome. It was On the Origin of the Species by Means of Natural Selection or the Preservation of Favored Races in the Struggle for Life. In that book, Darwin uses metaphor and other poetic imagery to argue his findings, telling his audience a story about life's natural order. Darwin used years of data to make his case for the theory he called natural selection, a perpetual life and death competition between living things whose most basic instinct is a deep self-interest that fuels their struggle for survival. Both of these men contributed astounding, intricate works of intellect to humanity, and they were certainly onto something when they talked about self-interest and competition. These ideas, though, that self-interest and cutthroat competition are most natural to our ecosystems and ourselves, are among the most revered and repeated stories that have ever been handed down by white culture. These ideas are among the most referenced, trusted, and ingrained perspectives on the natural and inevitable order of things. They have not been handed down as one of many stories that are true. They've been handed down as the story that is true about human nature and the nature of existence, the basis of who we are and how life just is. So this morning, we go in search of other seedling ideas to shed some light on the stories that have been crowded out by this powerful monoculture. And in that spirit, Let's rise in body or spirit and sing number 298 in the gray hymnal. These days, there's so much happening that a week can feel like a lifetime. But whatever you experience this week, whatever joys or sorrows are on your heart and your mind, we ask that you not carry them alone. And as is the tradition of this community, you'll come forward right over here and either drop a stone in the water, light a candle to honor something meaningful that happened to you this week. This congregation pulls together beautifully to share in sustaining the work and play that you share in. And now is the time when you can contribute financially as well to aid that dreaming and building and working together further.
As I go you everyone for your generosity. Our reading today is entitled, "The Master's Tools Will Never
Dismantle the Master's House." Our reading comes from the great activist and writer Audre Lorde. And these words come from a talk she gave at a women's conference in 1979, inviting her audience to think outside of the boxes we've been taught to live in. Advocating for the mere tolerance of differences is a total denial of the creative function of difference in our lives. Difference must not be merely tolerated, but seen as a means by which our creativity can spark. Only then does our interdependence, our connection with and need for people who are different than we are, become unthreatening. Only within that interdependency of different strengths, acknowledged and equal, can the power to seek new ways of being in the world generate. We have been taught either to ignore our differences or to view them as causes for separation and suspicion, rather than as forces for change. Without community, there is no liberation, but community must not mean a shedding of our differences.
And I know I've heard of like triathlons and biathlons doing like a choir performance, then going straight into a reading should be up there. That was really great. That was great, you guys. For generations, logging companies were one of the many industries that inherited and perpetuated the long-told story of self-interest and competition. Logging companies were one of many industries that turned Adam Smith and Charles Darwin's telling of the world into standard business practices. After a logging company clears an expanse of trees, they want to get new trees planted as soon as possible and start the growing process again. The better those trees grow, the more business and profit can grow. So wanting to stay on the cutting edge, so to speak, logging companies for generations looked to the most up-to-date scientific information they could access about how to help those trees grow faster. The scientifically proven process they used for centuries was this. After they cut down a crop of trees for processing, they cleared away any stray saplings and other plants that had sprung up and started growing willy-nilly. And the idea was to leave the soil bare and open to new growth. Then they would plant one kind of tree, Douglas fir, for example. And the idea was that this took away all of the competition for survival. Now the Douglas fir would not have to compete with the beech, the aspen, the cottonwood trees for sunlight and water. They could thrive unencumbered by rivals. This was the most up-to-date scientific approach available to these companies because for a very long time, forest ecologists understood trees to be solitary, self-interested life forms like the rest of us, out-positioning one another on the forest floor for the most advantageous spot, forcing the roots of other kinds of trees to seek elsewhere for water, hoarding their stores of carbon in case of future scarcity. And so it just made sense that in order to dominate their own economic competition, logging companies created the ideal environment for one species of tree to to let its own self-interest run wild, unchecked. But it was slow going, because in spite of their efforts, if a disease or a pest that was harmful to trees got a hold of one of those Douglas fir groves, it ran through like wildfire and killed all the trees. So after centuries of this, in the early 90s, a young woman named Suzanne Simard started her graduate studies in forestry in the Pacific Northwest. And through her research, she began to notice something strange. She noticed that trees in old growth forests, forests where the ecosystem had been undisturbed for generations, and the trees and plants, all forms grew thick and tangled together. These forests were remarkably resilient against disease and stress from extreme weather. Simard studied logging practices and noticed that a large number of newly planted Douglas fir trees were likely to die from disease and extreme weather whenever their neighboring aspen, birch, cottonwood, other trees were removed. She couldn't understand why that would be. With what she knew of competition for resources and survival of the fittest, this didn't make sense. By keeping with their own kind, evenly spaced from one another, each of the logging companies' Douglas fir trees had much more access to water and sunlight than the trees in the crowded, dense, old-growth forests. Simard suspected there was something she wasn't seeing, and her research took her underground. After nearly 30 years of research in temperate and coastal forests in North America and also in the Arctic, Simard pieced together her discoveries into a more complex understanding of the forest ecosystem. Underground, she found a network of tiny, fuzzy threads. And these fuzzy threads were mycorrhizal fungi. And these strands of fungi were wrapped around the roots of trees, connecting them to the roots of all the other trees around them. Out of sight, underground, the life of each tree was intricately interwoven with the lives around it. Douglas fir trees were not only connecting with Douglas fir trees, they were linked to countless other species too. And what Simard and her colleagues found was taking place within this web of connection was breathtaking. The trees were more than physically connected. They were sharing resources and information with one another. Older trees shared their water and nutrients with younger trees. Healthy trees shared their water and nutrients with trees that were sick or dying. When one tree began to develop a disease or a threatening insect infestation, the infected tree would send hormonal signals through the underground network to warn the others of the threat. And in turn, these trees who received the signal began building up their defenses to whatever specific threat they now knew was coming. And stunningly, when a tree died, it did not hoard its stores of carbon. Instead, Simard found at death, trees released the carbon they'd been storing back into the interconnected root system. Their final act passed on what sustenance they could to further the health and longevity of their neighbors. As Ferris Jabbour wrote for an article in the New York Times Magazine, Simard and her peers have demonstrated that an old-growth forest is neither an assemblage of stoic organisms tolerating one another's presence, nor a merciless battle royale. It's a vast, ancient, and intricate society. There is conflict in a forest, he writes, but there is also negotiation, reciprocity, and even selflessness. Decades after her discovery, Simard shared what it was like to slowly realize this intricate interconnectedness going on beneath their feet. She said, "I was taught that a tree is out there to find its own way." She was taught that trees would do best when planted an orderly length away from one another, strictly in the company of other trees exactly like them. She was taught that the way to help a Douglas fir thrive was to keep them safe from the threatening influence of different types of trees. Simard remembers how some of her more established colleagues mocked her when she first began her research. They found it foolish to waste time questioning certainties that had already been established, to look anywhere other than the white Western lens of self-interest through which they had all been taught to view and understand the natural world. Some complained that she was forcing her personal sentiments onto the data, seeing what she wanted to see. Simard writes, "They told me, why don't you just study growth and yield?" But she says, "I was more interested in how these plants interacted." And she adds, "My colleagues thought it was all very girly." Self-interest is real. Competition is real and can be a great thing. These forces are deeply embedded in our psyches and our society, but they are not the only forces at play within and around us. And what if we could live as trees do? What if it were possible to see in some way that we haven't tried yet, to unearth some new discovery of what lies between us and connects us? What if it were possible, when the lighting was just right, to catch a glimpse of these living threads, the shared nerves that exist between us and the earth? Maybe as we go through the motions of our day, we're just too distracted, or we just haven't learned yet to notice these unnamed threads running like a lifeline between our bodies, between our breath and the breath of trees, weaving us together into one shared life. It's lovely to think, if we could see it, feel our connectedness bone deep. It's lovely to think how we might live. Blessed be. Amen. Would you be with me in meditation and prayer, closing your eyes if you feel comfortable doing so. And as you start to notice your breath, would you find your pulse, maybe at your neck or your wrist? And just for a moment, notice your heartbeat. Be present with that rhythm. Feel how it connects you to a larger rhythm. few deep breaths in through your nose, out through your mouth. And if it's comfortable, you can keep your fingers on your pulse, or you can relax, put your hands back in your lap if you prefer. And I offer you a poem by Mary Oliver called When I Am Among the Trees. When I am among the trees, especially the willows and the honey locusts, equally the beech, the oaks and the pines, they give off such hints of gladness. I would almost say that they save me, and daily. I am so distant from the hope of myself, in which I have goodness and discernment, and never hurry through the world, but walk slowly and bow often. Around me the trees stir in their leaves and call out, "Stay a while." The light flows from their branches, and they call again. It's simple, they say, and you too have come into the world to do this, to go easy, to be filled with light, and to shine. Amen. Our closing hymn we have not done before, so if you read music, sing out loud and proud. It's number 1068 in the teal hymnal, Rising Green, 1068 Rising Green.
I'll play it through once.
Good idea. Good idea. Oh, and good idea. Please rise in body or spirit. In this week ahead that we have been given, may we never hurry through the world, but recognize our kindred everywhere we look, bowing often.